Hey, good morning, everybody. It is March 18th, 2026, and I wanted to do an update video because I realized that I haven't done one in a very long time about my knee and how things are going. I was actually looking back at YouTube the other day and realized that the last one I did was back in July of 2025, which was only 5 months after I'd got my knee replacement. And I pretty much stopped posting after that. Um, the reason was that in July, I everything had kind of been going okay. I'd had a couple setbacks, but I was still sort of thinking about going forward and getting the second knee done late in the fall. But as I said in that last video, I was kind of done predicting when it was going to happen because I just didn't know where things were going to be and what, week to week, month to month ended up looking like. And so over the next few months, I actually had a pretty major setback. For those of you who watch some of my original videos, you'll know that in addition to just the problems that led to the actual knee replacement itself, I've had a very, very long history of trauma on this leg. Started about 25 years ago when I blew out my ACL skiing. Since then, I had 2 or 3 other surgeries to do meniscal repairs. Then back post-pandemic, my ACL went bad and I had to get a version of an ACL revision. And post that surgery, which was back in 2021, I believe, I ended up damaging the superficial peroneal nerve down in my lower leg. And that nerve is the lower branch of the sciatic. So when you hear about people who have sciatica, I was essentially getting those kinds of symptoms. I had a compressed nerve. They ended up doing a nerve decompression surgery, helped a bit, but then all the pain came back. I ended up with what's called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Had a cascading set of issues with that that eventually led me to going and getting a nerve graft, where they actually cut a section out of the nerve, put in a graft. That was about 6 months pre the knee replacement. Nerves take a really long time to heal. I knew it was going to be 12 to 18 months. Had talked with the neurologist as well as the surgeon who was going to do my knee replacement, and everybody said 6 months post-op, as long as things are stable. It's the risks are still there. They're elevated anytime you've had other surgeries on the nerve. That one of the side effects that can happen in a very small number of cases with a knee replacement is you can get extra irritation around the nerve. And in one of my prior nerve surgeries, I not only had the nerve down near my ankle, the graft done, but they had actually had some scar tissue up right next to the fibular head, which is where the nerve connects up through the knee and then back into, the back of your leg, and then eventually into your sciatic nerve, and then up into your spine. And what ended up happening was that post the knee replacement, as I went through all of my rehab, I'd been constantly having some pain and some discomfort and some real issues around the fibular head. And so my PT had been doing a lot of work on that. If you remember from 7, 8 months ago, I was still not able to get my leg straight, still not able to get it straight today, but he'd done a lot of work where in PT he could do it. He was doing kind of torsional work to, relieve some of that pain at the fibular head. I had gotten back out on my bike. I was ramping up. I was doing a lot of walking. I was doing 3-4 days of riding a week, an hour up to 2.5 hours, a lot slower than I used to, but everything had been going okay. And then in about August, September, things really started to kind of drop off for me. And by the time we got into November, December, the nerve pain in my leg had gotten almost as bad as it was 5 years ago when all this stuff really started cascading. I hadn't slept through the night in 6 months. I went through back with the neurologist at Stanford and at UCSF. We were looking at a number of different things we could do. One option was we were going to try an implanted nerve stimulator that would lower the pain signals. I fought with insurance on that and it did not get approved. And so we started looking at the surgical route. I ended up partially paying myself for full leg MRI imaging of the nerves with something called an MR neurograph, which is like a very, very intense MRI. It was actually, it was 5 separate studies going all the way from my hip to my toes. I was in the MRI for 2.5 hours, which is crazy. But it gave me a really, really detailed picture, and the surgeons a really detailed picture of what was going on. And so what it turned out was happening was that down by my ankle, at the top of the nerve graft, essentially the nerve graft had failed. When you get a graft, what's supposed to happen is, your nerve is like this. They cut out a section of it, they put in a new graft, and over time, the fibers from the top grow through the graft, reconnect at the bottom. Those fibers should reconnect, ideally really nicely like this. Mine had bundled into what's called a neuroma, which is also called like a nerve tumor. It's not cancerous, but they just call it like a nerve tumor. So imagine you've got a straw that's going through with them with like a big bulb and a straw on the other side of it. That's what my nerve fibers were doing. And if I would touch it, I would literally get electric shocks all the way up down my leg. What the MRI showed was that up at the fibular head, essentially the top of that nerve where it pops out was completely encased in scar tissue, and so it was pinching and compressing that nerve. So if you've ever had, like you sleep on your neck wrong and you wake up with a kinked neck where you try to turn it and you just and it really just everything feels tight and it's painful. That's essentially what the kind of feeling was I was getting anytime I was moving my knee, my leg, and it got worse and worse with exercise, and it was definitely progressing. The last thing that the MRI showed was that it wasn't just at the fibular head and down at the graft. Essentially, the entire nerve now was having aberrant signaling, and so I was having cramping through my calf and in the front of my leg. I was getting like my foot would just sort of sometimes just cramp up on its own. If anybody's ever had a cramp, and your toes curl up, it was honestly getting pretty awful. And so last Thursday I went in and had the surgery on the nerve, and what they did was two things, and you can see it down here. So there's two locations. Sorry, I'm trying to get this in. There we go. So down at the bottom, this one, what they did was they went above where the damage was, and they actually severed the nerve, and then they capped it with some muscle, and they buried it into my leg. Up at this one, they did a second incision where they opened up about that long, and they essentially, roto-rooted out all that scar tissue that was around there. And it's called a decompression, and what it does is it allows the nerve to stop being squished and just kind of relax. Woke up from the surgery. It's all outpatient. This whole thing took maybe an hour and a half. They said the surgery went incredibly well. I was able to walk out on crutches. I was on crutches for a couple days, but what was amazing was I woke up from the surgery, and the nerve pain that I'd been having that was literally going from my knee to my toe was essentially gone. It was like that. That part of the pain was gone. So I'm still having post-surgical pain, but it's very, very traditional post-surgical pain. I'm now 5-6 days post-op. I'm walking around just fine. I can now, kind of tap right where that neuroma was, and I get no nerve pain up and down the leg. It's still very tender, but I think a lot of that is just because they, had to literally open this up. This was an open surgery, not an arthroscopic surgery. They actually had to get in, find the nerve, cut into my muscle, suture it in there after they capped it with another little piece of muscle, open the other one up, get a bunch of tissue out of there. They also used a product called VersaWrap, which is a hyaluronic acid and algae, of all things, product that basically you put in as a gel. You put it around the nerve, and it gives it the ability to kind of in the tissue to glide, and it stops scar tissue from adhesing onto that part of the nerve. So we're really hopeful that over the next month or so, this will just heal up. It will resolve a lot of the nerve pain I was having. And I'm really, really hoping that it also, and I think this is the case, that it probably was one of the root causes of why I was having so much pain and stiffness in the back of the knee, because that nerve, it comes up at the fibular head, it goes into the back of the knee, and then up into your, like up into your hamstrings. And so that was putting constant tension on the knee. So I'm actually really hopeful now that once I get past the surgical recovery, that my next stage will be get back into regular stretching. They said I don't need to go do PT again, but I'm probably gonna start working with a functional movement specialist and working on my gait, working on getting that range of motion back, and seeing where things go. So that's kind of the update on where I am. So not to scare anybody here, but as you go into a knee surgery, as you go into a knee replacement, one thing to really consider is that it is an incredibly traumatic surgery, right? We all know that they have to open your knee up, they're cutting off bone, they're putting on those, they're putting in the new hardware. And if you've had, excuse me, if you've had a number of prior surgeries in the area, especially if you've had anything like mine where you've got any kind of nerve damage around there, it's absolutely something to talk to your surgeon about. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I've done a bunch of research now, and the prevalence of people having nerve compression or nerve damage after knee surgery is still very low. It's like 0.3% to maybe 0.75% in the normal population. In people who've had prior nerve issues, different studies, but it might jump to 1 to 2%. But still, I got unlucky. I was one of that 1 to 2%, because the head of that nerve does come out right at the fibular head, and it's a really, really tight space. So it is something to be thinking about and considering, talking to your surgeon about, talking to your PT about, as they're thinking about the plan, both for the surgery as well as for your recovery. Now, the other thing that in retrospect, I thought a lot about is I had made the decision to do the cementless knee replacement instead of cemented. And my surgeon was like, it's fully up to you. He said, 90% of what he does are cemented. They're great. The cementless, there is some really good research that says at the 10, 15, 20 year marks that like the KOO scores and other things, like the natural feeling of the knee, that people have had like a statistical difference in how good that knee feels down the road. The downside to it is that initial period is actually a lot more traumatic, because they're actually taking the implants, press fitting them into your bone. The bone then has to actually grow into the implant. And so in retrospect, given that I had all the prior issues and the nerve issues, I should have gone cemented. It was one of those things where hindsight's 2020. I just had my 1 year checkup, and the knee itself is incredibly stable. The healing is done. The bone is fully integrated. I mean, before I had the knee replacement, I couldn't walk around without thinking that it was going to collapse on me again. And I was having these kind of attacks all the time where the knee just wasn't stable. And now it's rock solid. So I am, at this point, I've said this to a couple of people in the last couple of days, I am feeling hopeful for the first time, honestly, in several months, that I'm back on the right path, and that this might be the end of my nerve issues, and that maybe my knee everything will calm down. My knee will get, continue to improve. I can get the full range of motion back. I can get back on the bike. I can get back to walking in everyday life and being pain-free. Time will tell. I've got to get through this first period of 4 to 6 weeks of all the surgical healing. Nerves do heal incredibly slowly, and so it's probably going to be at least 6 months before I really know sort of where it's trending and what the terminal endpoint is going to be for all of this. Then when I get there, I still do have to think about my other knee, because my left knee is it's still not in great shape. The good news is it's stable, but it's painful. It's just really arthritic. I know that I have full thickness lesions inside the trochlear groove. I know that I've got a lot of arthritis that's up on the fibular head on the left one. I talked to my surgeon about that, and he again said, let's wait until the right one is fully healed up. The nerve is totally calmed down. You know that you can count on the right one as your good knee before you jump it into your left. So I think I'm honestly probably at a minimum 6 to 9 months away, possibly a year or more away. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna take it day by day, week by week, month by month, as I had kind of done before. So there is the 13-month update on a pretty complicated case. I will get back to doing maybe monthly updates at this point, whether it's good or bad. I basically hadn't done them, like I said, for a while, because I was just sort of deteriorating and just didn't feel like depressing myself and everybody else by saying things just still are getting worse. But now I've gotten to a point where I'm, very, very much crossing my fingers that it's going in the right direction, and that a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, I'll be in a better spot than I am today. So with that, hang in there. If you're on your journey, I'm always here if anybody wants to ping me and share stories or get any thoughts around nerve issues or other problems or CRPS. Please feel free to use me as a resource. Reach out on YouTube. My contact info is there. Have a great day. Talk to y'all soon.